Hey, everybody. Good Friday morning to you. I hope you're doing well. Happy New Year once again. Without any further ado, let's get started. Had to make sure the back end was operating properly because with StreamYard, unlike Zoom, StreamYard is in your browser and your browser needs something to make StreamYard effective, and that is random access memory. So it will quite literally take up the memory that's available around your computer. And if you don't have the proper adjustments, your computer can and will shut down. So with that, I am going to read the prepared text because I'm going to assume that you haven't had an opportunity to read what I wrote and maybe haven't even had a chance to read the entire report yet. And if you did, maybe you only read it once. Oakland Police report of a Bumbling cop was really a hit job on Chief LeRonne Armstrong. Well, that's the title. Oakland Police Chief LeRonne Armstrong is the victim of a high-tech hit job. Oakland's a mess, and it's not going to get any better. Why? Because we have the appearance of Oakland employees at high levels setting other valuable Oakland employees at high levels to take a fall that costs them their job, starting with, quote, paid leave. Why? Well, so those Oakland employees at high levels can take over the jobs of the valuable Oakland employees at high levels they managed to get rid of. How else to explain a report of a completely bumbling Oakland police officer, many in a position to know, had reached out on their own and without my prodding to tell me his name Michael Chung? And how else to explain that those sources point the accusatory finger at decorated Deputy Police Chief Angelica Mendoza? How else to explain how Officer Michael Chung's bumbling, first by running into a parked car while driving his OPD officer girlfriend to parts unknown, then later by pretending to conduct target practice. Okay, in a freight elevator at OPD headquarters, only to accidentally shoot off his revolver, became an instrument used against Chief Armstrong. How else to explain that sources tell me DC Mendoza, that's Deputy Chief Mendoza, is supposed to be Chief Armstrong's trusted agent to review these cases, and yet she did not disagree with the investigation? If you look back at the previous organizational chart, say from 2019, Deputy Chief Angelica Mendoza was arguably next in line to be Chief of Police of Oakland, behind Ann Kirkpatrick. But Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, tired of folks like this blogger writing and vlogging what you're seeing now, contemplating that she seems allergic to promoting Black men, elevated the popular 25-year veteran to the level of top cop. But the fact remains that Deputy Chief Angelica Mendoza has a stellar 25-year record as OPD employee, and her only blemish is that she attended Fremont High School rather than Skyline High School, like myself in the great class of 1980. Seriously, one look at Deputy Chief Angelica Mendoza's resume is all you need to know about what's going on here. The possible result of her frustration at not getting her due, all the while Oakland police officers like Chung are screwing up, and no one's doing anything about it. So my sources claim that the whole thing is a political maneuver by DC Mendoza, and they assert that Fremont High's finest, her, should also be on leave for failing Chief Armstrong. The monitors know this is not a huge case considering all the things Armstrong has been doing and the amount of cases that he has to review. Chief Armstrong has, quote, deputies, unquote, for a reason. My sources claim that they're supposed to be his trusted agents to carry out his goals, strategy, values, and mission. My sources also claim that DC Mendoza set up Armstrong and is benefiting from this character assassination. To recap, here's what really happened, separate from the law firm's report and from my city and coming from my city hall sources. Sergeant Michael Chung lives in San Francisco and had an unmarked car he took home. Chung leaves his apartment complex with his OPD officer girlfriend, whose name I don't yet know, and somehow hits another parked and unoccupied car. Chung does this with enough force to tear the bumper off. Sergeant Chung stops for a while, then drives away. Later, City of Oakland Police get a bill from an auto insurance company for damages. The OPD Internal Affairs Division gets all civil claims against the department. IAD, that's again the Internal Affairs Division, reportedly realizes it's a city car, but no report is made. The IAD commander realizes the sergeant is a friend and advises him, talking about to Chung, to make an official collision report, and Chung does. The IAD case is handled as a regular accident just as the hit and run part is omitted from the initial IAD report. Allegedly, the IAD commander influenced the IAD investigator to omit certain things, and the case goes away. This is from my sources, okay? It should be noted that the IAD commander has a boss, and that boss is Deputy Chief Mendoza. And Deputy Chief Mendoza is the whistleblower in this case. My sources assert that the case was screened by DC Mendoza, so she is just as responsible as Chief Armstrong. Then, a few months later, the same Michael Chung gets into the Oakland Police Administration building service elevator late at night. Chung's reportedly alone and so decides to practice his gun draw skills. And you can't make this up, folks, all right? And as he does, he accidentally pulls the trigger and shoots the elevator wall, sending a bullet on a course that could have ended hitting someone fatally. The shocked Chung leaves the service elevator after picking up the casing and doesn't report it. I have to gather myself for a bit after that one. That's still hilarious, all right? And thank God he didn't hit anybody. That was really reckless. Later, the bullet hole gets noticed, and it is turned into an investigation ordered by Chief Armstrong. Days go by, and no one admits to it, and eventually Sergeant Chung thinks he'll get caught, so he admits to it. I did it, basically, he says. Not me, of course, him. Chung is out on administrative leave, and his actions are investigated. The case is reviewed by the IAD commander and DC Mendoza, according to my sources. Sergeant Chung is found guilty and discipline is recommended. Again, the IAD commander omits facts to downplay it. To repeat, Deputy Chief Mendoza is Chief Armstrong's trusted agent to review these cases, and she doesn't disagree, with the IAD investigation. So, Chief Armstrong takes the recommendation of the IAD and the sergeants in the chain of command, which leads to DC Mendoza. That's supposedly his posse, right? So he's trusting his posse. That's different from the law firm report, which skips over the chain of command and points the finger right at Chief Armstrong in an almost knee-jerk way, which I personally find suspicious. And this is me talking after talking with my sources. My City Hall sources tell me Deputy Chief Mendoza reports this to the monitors, but interestingly leaves out her role as part of the chain of command. Reportedly, from my sources, hence why the report looks the way that it does. Reportedly, from my sources, Deputy Chief Mendoza has built a relationship with the monitors where they use her This is what they're saying. They use her to keep extending their $1.1 million a year contract. So she makes it appear that Chief Armstrong failed, but my sources say with authority that it was she who failed. The monitors say Chief Armstrong didn't watch the video and review the evidence. My sources assert that he only has the time to do that on termination cases, high-level use of force cases, and any other officer-involved shootings. By contrast, this is a case of a bumbling Oakland police officer. When it all boils down, that's what it is about. My sources argue that the whole affair is a political maneuver by Deputy Chief Mendoza, who should be also on leave for failing Chief Armstrong. My sources also argue, once again, that the monitors know this is not a huge case considering all the things Chief Armstrong has been doing and the amount of cases he has to review. The constant comment is that Chief Armstrong has, quote, deputies for a reason. My sources say that folks like DC Mendoza are supposed to be Chief Armstrong's trusted agents to carry out his goals, strategy, values, and mission. My sources argue that DC Mendoza set Chief Armstrong up and is benefiting from this character assassination. And I have the Chung playlist, as I call it. Michael Chung, shooting a hit and run, responsible for. Wilson Lau, who told allegedly IAD investigators to change the report about Chung. Now he works for the East Bay Regional Parks. Deputy Chief Mendoza was responsible for the internal affairs investigation at the time of both of those incidents in terms of the chain of command. Police Chief Armstrong is the fall guy. My city hall sources also say that the short video was shown at the executive meeting referred to in the report when presented to Chief Armstrong. But Chan Lee had never presented the long video. So that's what I was told. As I say, I'm sticking to it. All right. And as David Compton just chimed in here, sounds a lot like sounds like a lot of crookedness in the OPD. Yeah. And others have referred to the report, and my remark there is that, and I have the report actually embedded in the main post at zenny62blog.com. This is also at oaklandnewsnowblog.com and oaklandnewsonline.com. Now, the big problem is that when you read the report and you get to its conclusions, it does focus on a criticism of Internal Affairs Division, but it stops short of blaming the chain of command, including the people within that chain of command, okay, for not having the chief's back. It doesn't do that. And something else you have to consider, and this is a big something that has to be considered. The law firm is not embedded in the Oakland Police Department where they have an everyday function and they're doing rides and constant evaluation, and they've got earpieces in rooms and cameras over there and sentries, okay? It's not that kind of system. So it begs the question, who did they rely on for getting files to them, documents, emails, and helping them piece together what happened? And my sources point to Deputy Chief Mendoza as the ringleader among those who were working with the monitors. And so Sure, you always say the captain goes down with his or her ship, right? But that's only when the captain is given complete information to make the right call. What happens when the captain is deliberately not shown all of the information? What happens then? Because by the time it percolates up to LeRonne, he's so busy, he has to trust someone, some group, to quite literally watch his back. What's not written in the compliance report is the need for the chain of command to protect the person at the top, to give that person the right information. In fact, the report itself shockingly avoids making that point crystal clear. One could argue that it's inferred, but you would be a pretty doggone good contortionist to make that work. I mean, you would. Okay. There's and this is the overarching question of this. Why? Of all of the cases to make it to a place where it receives this kind of attention, would it have to be about an officer who has a girlfriend, who hits a car, and then later who accidentally shoots off his revolver? It sounds like someone decided to basically bring back Barney Fife and make him an OPD officer, and then invent a situation to write about him for fun and profit. If I didn't know better, I'd swear that's what this is. Or maybe somebody is engineering what might be another episode of Blue Bloods. But with all of the really important life-threatening cases that are out there, why is it? It's this. The report makes the implication that this is an example of a system out of control, that it doesn't properly monitor itself. And so we're led to believe that because of the way this case was handled, that other more important cases get similar poor treatment. But as I look into this and as I talk to people, what's clear to me is that an inordinate amount of time is spent on cases that do involve life, like officer-involved shootings, for example. And so because you're dealing with cases that involve, well, life and death, it's quite understandable that an Oakland police officer would take a case like the one of a Bumblng, representative of the flock, and not give it the full weight of consideration it deserved. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about a bumbling cop. One can argue that because of the gravity of the situations that the police have to deal with, okay? All right? Because of the gravity of the situation that police have to deal with, that on situations like this, we have cops quite literally making mistakes. The law isn't followed like it should be. That's how I'm starting to read it. In other words, I don't look at this in a fashion that could be described as linear. I look at it as non-linear. In other words, linear means that in the parlance of this discussion, linear means that I or you or we as a system handle these situations the same way, regardless of severity. But the reality, by evidence of the report itself, would point to more life-threatening situations being handled with a greater degree of by-the-book actions. All right. Now, Dave Compton says, we really expect the policemen to uphold the law, but do they really? Dave, I don't think that's the question here. I think the question is the law paid attention to when the cases are more severe? And I would argue that it is. But the other argument, which I do believe the report leads to, that is of equal weight, but is frightening, is that because the lower cases don't get handled the way the upper cases do, that the lower cases can be used for and against a particular officer or officers, depending on the office political climate of the time. That should not be. And the report does not address that. Okay. The report does not address that. And so I'm not saying the report should be taken with a grain of salt, but none the least, quite the contrary. The report does point to a problem. It reports to a situation where people can and try to ascend by character assassination. And where that happens, it means you don't have trust. Again, if there was a chain of command that was designed to really protect the chief of police, all right, then we would not hear about this case the same way. Oh, sure. I'm sure absolutely someone would have leaked that Mr. Chung fired his revolver and that he had a girlfriend, and maybe doesn't get out far, right? But because this appears in a report, and because the new mayor of Oakland, Shang Tao, reacted upon that, as did the still in place Chief Administrative Officer Ed Reskin, and then because the Oakland Public Information Officer tossed out that red meat, well, guess what happened? Fling! Importance, all right? I'm not discounting it, but I'm saying that the way it's presented, pointing directly at the chief, according to my sources, is recklessly bad. It's awful. But in defense of the media, what does one have to go by but that? But what I know is worse, that someone would essentially work to fashion a story that doesn't tell the real truth, and that conveniently leaves them out of the situation. There's that to me is the most frightening aspect of this entire affair, because you're dealing with officers, their lives and their livelihoods, and one person's already been affected. So what do you do? There are people who want Mendoza placed on administrative leave as well. Do you simply say we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater and put her on leave, and then who else? Who else at Internal Affairs Division? I think Lynn Raphael, who ran for auditor several years ago, put it on Facebook pretty well when he said that the question is there restorative justice for police officers or chiefs? I think it's an interesting starting point, but I think the question has to be, which one of the recommendations are the best to use? My thought is we need to go beyond those recommendations, because I'm not comfortable with the place from which they came. When the recommendations come from a document that others believe is fixed, then it's a fair chance that the line police officers are not going to take those recommendations seriously. Because by design, they become divisive. And that's where we are, where with what the report put out impacted, or how it impacted the Oakland Police Department. Dave says they tend to look past their actions because of being a policeman. Dave, again, I don't agree with you entirely, and I don't think that blanket statements fit here, and I think that may be the problem. Again, at a lower level, it's quite clear that standard laws and procedures are not followed. But the argument seems to be that when the cases are not involving life and death, there is a tendency to be lax. And because of that tendency, there is an environment where the resulting actions can be made to be used against a superior officer. That's what we're dealing with here. There are a number of people going to have, ideas and assumptions and hatreds about police. But the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what we call the organization. We're always going to have an organization in this society that protects us from each other. We are always going to have an organization in this society that protects us from each other. That organization is not going to be able to do it all the time without using some type of weaponry. All right? That organization is not going to be able to do it without having some type of weaponry, and therein lay the difficulties. And I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm not. But I am pointing out the fact. We are always going to have police. We can't just say we're not going to have them. Or we're going to have a situation where someone within a supposedly not police environment is going to wind up behaving just like an officer because of a situation. That is unavoidable. So I think what we need to have is, I think the Oakland Police Commission should be the one heading up an investigation with a series of conclusions. I'm not comfortable with the way this was done because it was internal, the reports released, and yet we have a police commission. Let's let the police commission do its job. All right. That ends this broadcast. If you have any questions, you can send them to me. You can email them to me here. There. Or you can text them here. There. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks, Dave. That ends this broadcast.